Charlie D'Agata is in London. Charlie, British Prime Minister Theresa May has raised the country's threat level from severe to critical following this attack. What exactly does that decision mean for the city?
Well, there will be marked significant difference immediately. As of tomorrow, certainly we'll see it. What this means is you'll see British troops taking the place of British police officers, even armed armed patrol units that were deployed in the aftermath of this attack. So there will be an increased presence. There'll be an increased police presence, especially in public areas. So it will be a marked difference. And it is significant. It's for that reason that although this has happened before where they've increased the security level, it only usually lasts for a few days for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's unsustainable in terms of personnel. Secondly, it just puts everybody on sort of war footing, and it's not the message that they want to send out. So this is a measure that would have been taken for a very important reason. Obviously, there's a significant risk out there that the government feels that they need to find some way of preparing for, to reassure the public, but is not likely to last for several days unless, of course, they need to extend it for several days.
London police say there is a hunt involving hundreds of detectives and members of British intelligence to find out who is responsible. What can you tell us about the investigation?
Well, it's hard to tell how the investigation is advancing for a couple of reasons. First of all, British authorities are far less transparent, I suppose is the way of putting it, as Americans are when it comes to these investigations, for the reason that even if they have identified a suspect, they wouldn't put that out as an all-points bulletin, ask for the public's help, have you seen this person? And the reason is they want to try to see if they can identify the suspect and then try to figure out where that network is and move in on several different locations in order to then launch these raids. So they may be making progress, and it stands to reason that they should be making progress. I mean, just behind me is where that subway train was attacked. And if you've spent any time here at all, you'll realize the place is blanketed by security cameras, 12,000 security cameras in the London subway system. So in the 5 or 6 stops from Wimbledon to here in Parsons Green, there would have been security cameras on the platforms, on the entrances, inside the trains. So it's unlikely that they wouldn't at least have some sort of visual fit on whoever left that device behind. Now, the reason that they're not sharing that, well, that's for us to speculate. I guess I would speculate the reason is they want to identify that suspect, find out what sort of network, if any, this man or woman had, and to move on that rather than to share that information with the British public.
And yet, as you say, when British authorities are less transparent than Americans when it comes to these kinds of investigations, we see that President Trump is tweeting that those who carried out the attack were already known by Scotland Yard. What do we know about this claim?
Well, I have to say that caused waves here. British Prime Minister Theresa May sort of rebuked that comment, said that it really wasn't helpful. Now, whether or not, again, we can only speculate, if this suspect has been identified and has been on the radar, or they had them in the sights, Scotland Yard had them in the sights, as President Trump suggested, that would not be something that British authorities would want to share. I don't know whether that's the case, but it certainly wasn't received here by the Metropolitan Police to suggest that they had a suspect like this, on their radar, in their sights, and something like this happened anyway. Of course, it's going to reflect badly on them, or the idea anyway, which is what it looks like, is that there's intelligence that's being shared from anti-terror authorities here to anti-terror authorities in the United States, and perhaps, as it appears here, President Trump was perhaps overplaying that and suggesting that they may know, the British may know, and therefore the Americans may know. So I have to tell you, it has caused a lot of ripples over here.
Overplaying is a good word to describe that. You also mentioned in your piece that ISIS has claimed responsibility, but that this attack doesn't bear the terror group's trademark tactics. What more can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it doesn't really fit ISIS's MO. It's not to suggest, when they have in the past, and this came from an official ISIS channel when they claim responsibility for it, and in the way, the language that they used suggested that there was more than one person involved in planting this bomb, that there There's a detachment, as they called it, so suggests that more people were involved. But usually in the case, ISIS fighters and bombers are moving toward martyrdom, which is to say that they're suicide bombers. These vests, these suitcases, we saw that in Paris, we saw it in Brussels. The idea of rigging a bomb like this and then leaving it behind on a remote, as we've understood, there was a timer. It had the ingredients, TATP, the same sort of ingredients that you'll find in other bombs of this nature. More, I hate to use the word successful, but bombs that did detonate as they were supposed to. This one didn't appear to. That's really not the ISIS MO, but as we've seen, believe me, I've seen it in Syria, I've seen it in Iraq, I've seen it in Europe. ISIS doesn't always stick to the playbook. If they find ways of attacking vulnerabilities, they will go down that way. But again, the idea that this is not a suicide attack is a bit of a play that's gone to the right of ISIS that we really haven't seen much of. It's not to say that they're not responsible for it, and in taking responsibility for the attack here, they also threatened that more attacks were on the way. Those are threats that are being taken seriously, and I'm sure that had something to do with the decision to raise the terror threat here.
So given those threats, Charlie, and given that we've already seen a number of terror attacks this year in Britain, in London and Manchester, how has this atmosphere affected the public's psyche there? I mean, just looking behind you, we saw that the tube was running, so the trains are still going, life is still going on. What would you say has been the response of the public to all of these threats and attacks?
Well, as long as I've been here, I'm always amazed at the stoicism and the strength of the British public, especially Londoners. It's a tough city. Now, when I got here this morning when this first happened, the cordon here was, I don't know, about 500-600 yards, maybe even more than that down the street. So this whole place is in lockdown. Obviously, all this area is in lockdown. I'm looking at a shop that was closed off, and they had to evacuate the people there. But right behind me is a pub that was open tonight. It was very busy. All the shops and cafes were open. The trains have been running back and forth. I can't tell if there are passengers on this particular line, but the subway system itself was running today. So they cut off this area here for obvious reasons. The investigation's going on, but it didn't mean that the attack here meant that the entire subway system would be shut down. And that's what we're seeing here. This idea, keep calm and carry on, it came from this country for a reason. It is how they live. And in the attacks that we've seen before, it's not to say that they're callous, they're not sad, the hurt caused to the victims and the families. It's not to say that they're not shocked, that they just move on, but they refuse to be cowed by terrorism, and they're living it every day. And as you said, unfortunately, tragically, this has become a way of life. This is what, the fourth or fifth terrorist attack, and serious terrorist attack we've seen in this country. I mean, that Manchester was really heartbreaking. That one did leave a punch.
Charlie D'Agata, thank you for sharing your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you.